leaves off. And they're lying to children as well. They lie even to children. This book was written and produced by the producer of Al Gore's movie. What she did was to switch the captions on the graphs for temperature and CO2 going back 650,000 years so that she could show that it was CO2 that had changed first and temperature that had followed, when the unanimous opinion of the scientific literature, by a very simple series of measurements, shows that it was exactly the other way around. It was temperature that had always changed first and CO2 had followed. And she wrote the text that you see there, stating this lie, and when we drew her attention and that of her publishers to this lie, they point blank refused to correct it. They didn't deny it was a lie, but they would not correct it. And this in a book for children. So now we move on to the truth about what has been happening to temperatures. You're going to like this. I got this from Professor M.I. Bhatt of the Indian Geological Survey when I was asking him what was happening to the Himalayan glaciers. They're doing fine, by the way. He's got 200 years of records from the days of the Raj, when we first began monitoring these things, don't you know? And the glaciers are showing no particular change in 200 years. The only glacier that's declined a little is Gangotri, very famous glacier, because there's been local geological instability, nothing to do with global warming. All the others are doing fine. Anyway, he kindly tried to indicate to me what has happened to temperatures over the last 300 years. A brief history of global warming. Give him a round of applause for that one. I mean, these scientists have a wonderful sense of humor. They really do. And this is a guy, diligent researcher, really knows what he's doing, loves his glaciers. How many of you can tell me how many glaciers debouch from the Himalayan plateau into India? Anybody? Anybody guess? 20? No. 9,575. It's quite extraordinary how many glaciers there are. Most of them haven't been visited. How many glaciers in the world? More than 160,000. Most of them in Antarctica. So let's look on now at the history of temperature, then going back 650 million years, 550 million years, back to the Cambrian era, 550 million years ago. Oh yes, I remember it well. And at that time, I remember this, CO2 concentration was 20 times what it is today. And the amusing thing about that is you hear about ocean acidification, which is another complete nonsense. It's their fallback. They've gone from global warming to climate change. They've gone from climate change to energy security. And they can't go quite from energy security to absolute rubbish, so they're going to go via ocean acidification on the way. Now, what are they doing here? In the Cambrian era, that was when the calcite corals first achieved algal symbiosis, when there was 20 times as much CO2 in the atmosphere as there is today. All we're talking about, all the UN is talking about, is we may be able to double or perhaps even triple CO2 concentration before we run out of fuels to do it with. So there's no way we're going to get to those concentrations ever again. It's clearly going to do no harm whatsoever to the corals. And look at how little correlation there is in that graph between temperature in blue there and CO2 concentration in black. Plainly, CO2 is only a bit part player in all this. And here is the last 10,000 years of what's called the Holocene warm period. And you can see that most of the time it's been warmer than it is today. And, sorry, went past her. Now this one is the earliest instrumental temperature record we have, the Central England temperature record. And it shows, between the arrows there, that between 1700 and 1735, a third of a century, temperatures rose in central England by 4 degrees Fahrenheit. They managed just about 1 degree Fahrenheit in the whole of the 20th century. And the significance of 1700 to 1735 is that was before the Industrial Revolution began. We could have had nothing whatever to do with that temperature increase. And it is 9 times as fast a rate of increase as we have seen in the whole of the 20th century. So when they tell you the rate of increase in temperature is something wholly new, you look at that graph and it's absolute rubbish. So we then go on to the truth about today's climate. Now, the curious thing about these truths is that you will not have seen them in almost any major news medium. First, we've seen temperature falling. Then we see it really is cooling. Then we see that sea level follows, Arctic sea ice extent follows a nice, regular sine wave curve. And each different coloured line there is a different year. This year's line is in red, and as you will see, it's just very much where it always has been. There's nothing spectacular about that. You may have heard, because the newspapers have gone on and on and on and on about it, that in the 15th of September 2007, at the summer sea ice minimum in the Arctic, there was about 27% less ice than there normally is. And this was blamed, of course, on global warming. But it was nothing to do with global warming. It was to do with unusually strong winds and currents coming up from the tropics, as a NASA paper records. And you can see there, the purple is the sea ice extent in 2007 at the summer minimum, then 2008, and then 2009, where the sea ice extent on September the 15th, just a couple of weeks ago, was 24% higher than it had been in 2007. How many of you have seen that figure reported? No, I thought not. And here then, wait a minute, yes, is Greenland. You have all heard, let's have a hands up on this. How many of you have heard that Greenland is melting away? Yes, that's right, you've all heard that. Right.